How's it going, everybody? Nathan Mummert here with the Truth About Hair Restoration. Today I have Seif Sidky on the line. It's a pleasure. How's it going, Seif?
Great, great. How are you, Nathan?
Doing well. I've been looking forward to this interview, and I've known you for about a year now. Been working together on some things, and so super excited to dive in and really figure out, what makes you different and really what makes you unique in the industry. Seif Sidky is with International Hairlines. They have a bunch of locations, actually: Florida, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, and Egypt. So we're actually going to talk a little bit about the Egyptian market as well. So how did you get started with SMP?
The same old cliche story that a lot of the my fellow SMP artists. I was a client first. I decided to become an artist as I was getting my own head tattooed. I had to. It was a 3-hour drive for me to get my procedure done, and I was like, how is this not readily available in a market like South Florida, which is pretty much the vanity capital of the world, you know?
Yeah.
And that's really how I got started. This was about a little over 4 years ago, and I haven't looked back since.
Very cool. Only 4 years, huh? That's crazy.
Yeah.
You accomplished a lot in 4 years. How many?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm one of those guys that when I tell like my students, for example, and other fellow artists, they're like, oh, it's only been like, like last year, for example, when I was training quite a lot of people. Oh, you've only been doing this 3 years? How do you know so much? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, this industry is only like 10 years old.
Yeah.
So, but in those few years that I've been working, I've been like dedicating every minute and every hour to it. I've done quite a lot of work being one of the very few artists in South Florida at first.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, not only have you done, is it up to thousands of procedures by this point? Hundreds of procedures at least?
Oh yeah, no, I've definitely passed the 1,000 mark. I'm
Nice.
probably closer to 2,000 at this
Yeah,
point. You lose count after a while, to be
yeah,
honest.
I'm
And
sure.
then
But
that's not counting, like all the different procedures in the different locations. So
yeah,
and touch-ups and all of that.
not only that, but you also do all the training classes and everything else. So yeah, that's super impressive. And then a bunch of different locations and working with a lot of other artists. So world renowned for sure. So how did you become known as the SMP repair guy?
Yeah, that's unfortunately and fortunately for me, I guess. You know, Florida for a couple of years was known as like the hub for bad SMP work. Unfortunately,
Mm.
there's just it's a very like Wild West type of state in that sense. There's little regulations, and a lot of people were attempting to do this without proper training a few years back, and there was a lot of bad work around. And I was basically self-learned in terms of how to repair bad work. And at the beginning, I actually, and I'm not afraid to admit this, at the beginning, I probably tried to repair jobs that were unreparable just with SMP.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like why I've learned through the years to figure out when it is that we can use SMP to fix bad SMP, and when it is that you have to resort to removal options before you can fix something. You can't just keep building on top of other buildings. Sometimes you have to resort to demolition before rebuilding. So yeah, I'm pretty confident I see more repair work than the average practitioner out there.
Yeah, yeah, that's huge. And then typically what you said, usually to kind of start over is usually recommending what is it? Basically laser removal essentially.
Right. So laser removal is definitely one of the it's the most widely known and most common removal option.
Sure.
I actually we actually developed our own removal product because the demand was there, and that removal product is non-laser, which is great for several reasons. Number one, um, lasers are expensive and they have to be done under medical supervision, or at least under a medical license. They're very expensive and they're very painful as well. So we developed a product called Undo, which basically, it works great for scalp micropigmentation. It was developed specifically for SMP and permanent makeup. And it works well on, smaller sized tattoos, basically. It's been working really well in terms of helping me with the repair work, because sometimes you don't need full removal. Sometimes just a little bit of lightening will be enough for you to go back in there and fix bad work.
Definitely. Yeah, that's really cool. So yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
that. I've seen the Undo brand around a little bit, and so I didn't realize that you guys had actually made that yourselves. So that's really awesome.
Yeah. No, it's really, really exciting. We just launched a couple of months ago, and we're going to be rolling it out in a lot of the conferences this year, and we're getting a lot of interest and a lot of people trying to become certified in it.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I assume over the next few years that that'll be growing quite a bit, and that'll kind of hopefully become the new standard. Is that what you're hoping?
Yeah, that's a plan at least. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I
definitely.
believe you can do it. So that's cool, man.
I appreciate that.
I love it. So there's a lot of good work out there, a lot of substandard work, but through a lot of social media pictures that you see, from what I've heard too, artists can be photoshopping or even sometimes stealing other artists' photos. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure this is not unique to SMP only. There are obviously, unscrupulous people out there. Some people are gonna try to gain an edge or fudge the game a little bit. Some people do Photoshop or add filters or what have you. But I think seasoned artists can kind of see through that. But the general public doesn't, and that's kind of where it gets a little bit dicey, because it can be deceiving sometimes. I've always been one to say, look, I mean, a true measure of an artist is not the picture that you take right after a procedure, filtered or unfiltered or redness removed. They're not. It's really about what it looks like in real life. Healed pictures are always better than fresh pictures, because obviously healed pictures is what the client is walking around with. And even better are pictures from a year or 2 years down the road. That's really the true measure of a good artist versus a bad one. So as far as my thoughts on the subject, obviously I don't agree with it, but it's becoming a pretty competitive market, and I kind of see why they're doing that. As far as like image theft, that's just a big no. That's just literally just theft. I mean, put in the hard work and be patient. One thing I preach to my students is there are no shortcuts in SMP. It's a very, very old school type of trade, craft, if you will, and you can't get good too quickly. It just doesn't happen. It's one of these things where you need experience. It's literally manual. So the more you do it, the better you're gonna get at it. And there are just no shortcuts. And unfortunately, in today's society, in the digital age, everybody wants a quick turnaround. And this is definitely one of those industries where you don't make $1 million overnight. It takes years and years to build a successful business and to gain a trusting clientele.
Definitely. Yep, I think that's huge, man. Super important. And what do you think about all the trainings and pretty much seems like a lot of artists, once they start doing this for a few months or maybe a year, they just instantly go into starting to do training and help, training other people how to do it basically. What are your thoughts on the standards that they're using to offer that training?
Well, that kind of speaks to the same problem. With the market being more competitive, and unfortunately, some people just seeing dollar signs when they get into it. And if they find that they're not getting as many clients as they would like, then they resort to training because they think it's probably quicker money, which I believe is a bad mistake. Like when I started training, I actually was against me myself starting to train, and at the time I didn't own my own company. I was under a larger company, and they're the ones that kind of pushed me to train, and I wasn't 100% comfortable with it, to be honest with you. And but the demand was there, obviously. So basically, it's one of these things where, like, do as I say, don't do as I do situations. But if you want to be a good trainer, obviously you have to have that patience, right? You have to be a good educator, but at the same time, you have to have a ton of experience, because there are so many different scenarios when it comes to SMP, that you have to have seen it all, basically. And nobody's really seen it all, myself, even the most experienced guys, the Ayulos and Giroux and the Paul Clarks, all these guys, I know for a fact that they see cases where they're like, wow, I've never encountered that before. And that's like the exciting thing about this, because if every scalp was the same, it would get pretty damn boring after a while.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah.
And do you guys actually, that kind of reminds me too, I mean, do you guys do a lot of, or do you do mostly, shaved head look and shaved head cases, or do you guys do a lot of like density cases as well?
Still, the majority are still shaved head cases, and those are my personal favorite. But obviously the market is shifting a little bit. We're getting more and more cases of density, female density and male density. A lot more transplant patients that are coming in to add density or supplement their hair transplant. As I work with a local transplant doctor here, Dr. Charles, who you know very well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of collaboration now between SMP artists and transplant doctors, which is good, because we were shunned by the transplant community in the past, and now they're embracing us because they see the value and how we can actually work together. So I get clients that come in for consultations, and I actually tell them maybe sometimes transplants are actually a better option than SMP in certain cases.
Totally.
So but to answer your question, still probably about 50% shaved heads, and the other 50% are mixed between scars, density cases for men and women, and alopecia.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that that was a good point you brought up too. I'm seeing that more and more, like you said, I mean, how you kind of partnered up with, Charles Medical and, with the transplant side. And I think it's good to sometimes, give people the option to whatever is best for them, and to not just be one-sided, and whether you offer transplants only or SMP, and sometimes even a combination of both, from what I've seen too, can really help. You get the actual hair, implanted, but then you can also help with the density and fill in those areas as well. So
correct.
That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So did you talk enough about, did you already kind of touch on what makes your training at International Hairlines Academy different and unique? Or do you feel like you want to touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I take great pride in my trainings and International Hairline Academy, because we try to do things a little bit differently. Obviously, there are a lot of good trainers and a lot of even more great artists out there. That doesn't necessarily translate into good teaching. But there are good training academies. But what makes International Hairlines Academy a little bit different is that we do a 4-day intensive hands-on classroom course, but we prerequisite that with an online training. So what the online training does is basically it takes care of all the theory, whether it's, you know, SMP theory, needle theory, machine theory, all that, safety and sanitation, bloodborne pathogens. So the students learn all that stuff before they come into class. And all that is taught by Pam Neighbors, who's a colleague of mine. And in my opinion, she is the best SMP educator in the world. Nobody teaches better than her. The online course is obviously done by her. And when students come to me in the classroom, they're already experienced. Not obviously hands-on experience, but they already know the fundamentals. So when they come to me, they're ready to go. You know, we're getting straight to work. We're not wasting, I don't want to say wasting, but we're not spending a day or two going over all the theory. We're getting down to the technicalities of the actual procedures, which I think my students love. So that's a huge factor that makes us different. Another thing is, you know, we collaborate with a lot of different artists. Obviously, 2 artists are better than 1 in a training because you get different points of view, you get different tips and tricks and so on. And then also we provide, you know, lifetime support, which I believe is really important. And with this being a fairly larger, dedicated SMP Academy, you know, we're not just doing the trainings in the back of a clinic or a regular practitioner office. This is a dedicated academy, so it means that the students are always welcome back to do additional learning. They can bring their clients and models here to be worked on under supervision. I still have, as a matter of fact, I have one of my trainees from last year with his own client right now in a different room.
Nice.
Because you know, I want to provide that lifetime support. I want to make sure that they're constantly doing good work and constantly improving, and they don't just take a course and then, you know, fly off into the night and good luck. You know what I mean? So I wish I had that kind of training when I started. You know, so I know exactly what was lacking back then, and now you know, I'm able to provide that, thankfully.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like that's cool. So they got a lot of the online training, take care of a lot of the nuts and bolts and the informational stuff, and then they get to do it in person for a few days. They also get machine too.
Yeah, and by the way, when I say online training, it's not just a video series of tutorials. It's more about you actually get a machine to practice with at home on fruits before you come into class. So it's not like you're just like absorbing information that you can get in a manual or whatever. You're actually learning how to grip the machine. You're learning how to hold it, you know, the right angles and so on, and you get to practice. And it's interactive. So as you're practicing at home, we're giving you feedback, and this is before the class even starts. So that's really, I think it makes for a much better educational experience.
Really cool, man. I love that. So last thing I think is I wanted to touch on is, you know, the market in Egypt, because, you know, pretty much all of the other artists that I've interviewed and talked with are either in US or pretty much mostly, I think, in US. So what's the market like over in Egypt?
Man, it's interesting. I get that question a lot. When I first got started, I always had in the back of my head to, you know, go to Egypt because it's my home country. And when I started, I knew it was rough, like trying to deal with the red tape over there, the government, all that stuff was very tough. But I'm so glad that right now it's running like a well-oiled machine. 2 years into it, and I'm pretty certain that our Cairo clinic is the busiest in Africa and the Middle East, if not the world. We have five practitioners over there, and they're each doing 2 to 3 clients a day. So, and obviously that helps because we were the first SNP clinic in the country of 100 million people with a serious balding problem over there. So the market is great. Obviously, it has its own challenges with education. And as a marketer, you know how hard and how expensive that can be, educating the general public about something that they don't know about, especially something as taboo as a tattoo. In a fairly conservative country. But the feedback has been great. We have great clients and great reviews, and we get clients from all over the Middle East, not just Egypt, even from Southern Europe, so in Africa as well. So I'm happy to say that it's going really, really well in Cairo.
That's awesome, man. Very cool. Yeah, it seems like every time I talk to you, you're either flying to a different state or a different country. So I'm sure.
Yeah, it's great. Now I get to go. I get to go to my home country, visit my family, and
That's
visit
awesome,
the
man.
clinic. Just visit the clinic and meet with the clients and head back. It's a lot less stressful now than it was last year. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's what happens from being a business owner, man. I know, like, we go through those times where you want to rip your hair out, and you go through those other times when you finally got things smooth sailing, it's good to go, and that's what we do it for, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
really cool, man.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time with me today. If anybody wants to come and see Seif or any of his other artists, they can go to internationalhairlines.com. And again, locations in Florida, Pittsburgh, North Carolina, Syracuse, and Egypt currently. And I assume more on the way. Is that right?
I'm actually trying to hold off on that.
Okay.
I'm not trying to bite more than I can chew. I've been doing that for too long, and I'm not really looking to, because that's just way too much work, and I want to kind of strengthen the existing locations for
Sure.
now.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that's smart too. You gotta make sure you can
Yeah.
still deliver results. So.
Yeah, especially now that I'm, working on other projects such as the removal product, for example, and trainings and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm actually working also on some video educational series. Speaking of trainings, for those who are experienced in SMP, and now there are a ton of artists around the world, and for accessibility purposes, I'm working on a couple of different video series for advanced techniques and so on. I'm gonna release an SMP repair video in the next couple of weeks, which I'm really excited about, and that's going to be through Team Micro,
Very cool.
as well as the Undo online training series as well.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, exciting things to come.
Love it, man. Very cool. Well, thanks so much for taking the time with me today. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, like I said, internationalhairlines.com. We'll go ahead and put the link in the post, and we'll, hopefully this post we can boost it out in your area around your clinics there. And so yeah, man, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for having me, man, and thank you for shining the spotlight on our little industry. But it's a baby, but it's still growing, and it's growing pretty quick.
It's growing fast, man. Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Nathan. All right, have a good one. All right, bye.